This is the story of how America's biggest seafood chain was gutted from the inside. The all-you-can-eat shrimp had almost nothing to do with it. When Red Lobster filed for bankruptcy in May 2024, headlines everywhere blamed a $20 endless shrimp promotion. That promotion lost the company about $11 million. $11 million. For a chain doing over $2 billion in annual sales, that's a rounding error. The real damage was done a decade earlier, in a single transaction most customers never heard about. Follow the money with me, because once you see how this works, you'll see it everywhere. Red Lobster started in 1968 in Lakeland, Florida. One restaurant opened by a restaurateur named Bill Darden. His idea was simple: bring affordable seafood to inland America to families who lived nowhere near a coast. It worked so well that General Mills, the cereal company, bought the concept just 2 years later and scaled it across the country. By the 90s, Red Lobster was the anchor of a restaurant empire so big that General Mills spun it off into its own public company, Darden Restaurants, named after Bill himself. Darden owned Olive Garden, Longhorn Steakhouse, and Red Lobster, and for decades, Red Lobster was the flagship. But by the early 2010s, the flagship was aging, sales were slipping, seafood costs were rising, and Darden's shareholders wanted the underperformer gone. So in 2014, Darden sold Red Lobster to a private equity firm called Golden Gate Capital for $2.1 billion. Now here's where you need to pay attention, because this is the part the shrimp headlines never explain. Golden Gate didn't want to pay $2.1 billion of its own money. Private equity firms almost never do. Instead, they used a maneuver called a sale-leaseback. Red Lobster owned an enormous amount of real estate, hundreds of its own buildings, and the land underneath them, accumulated over 4 decades. Within weeks of the acquisition, that real estate was sold off to a property investment company for roughly $1.5 billion. Think about what just happened. Golden Gate bought the company for $2.1 billion, then immediately recovered most of that purchase price by selling the company's own property out from under it. The buyout largely paid for itself. But nothing is free. Every one of those restaurants that Red Lobster used to own outright, mortgage-free, rent-free, now had a landlord, and the leases weren't cheap. Red Lobster went from owning its real estate to renting it, starting at roughly $119 million a year, with rent increases of 2% built in every single year, locked in for decades. By 2023, the company's own bankruptcy filing put its lease obligations at $190 million a year, nearly 10% of everything the company brought in. That's not a promotion mistake. That's a permanent hole drilled into the bottom of the ship, engineered to get wider every year. And this is the private equity playbook, by the way, not a one-off. Extract the hard assets, load the operating company with obligations, and collect either way. The restaurant can succeed or fail. The real estate money is already banked. Keep that in mind, because Red Lobster is far from the only company this has happened to. Chapter 2 of the story starts in 2016, when Golden Gate began cashing out. The buyer was Thai Union, one of the largest seafood suppliers on the planet, the company behind Chicken of the Sea. Thai Union paid $575 million for a 25% stake, and by 2020, it had taken control of the whole company alongside an investor group. On paper, that sounds fine. A seafood company owning a seafood restaurant makes sense, right? But look closer at the incentive structure, because this is where the second conflict of interest enters the story. Thai Union wasn't just Red Lobster's owner, it was Red Lobster's supplier. The company selling shrimp to Red Lobster now controlled Red Lobster's purchasing decisions. And according to later court filings, Red Lobster's own leadership steered the chain toward buying more and more of its seafood from Thai Union, cutting out competing suppliers along the way. When your landlord already extracted your real estate and your owner profits from selling you your own inventory, the restaurant itself stops being the business. It becomes the host. Which brings us finally to the shrimp. In June 2023, Red Lobster took its famous Ultimate Endless Shrimp promotion, normally a limited time event, and made it permanent. $20, all you can eat. Customers did exactly what customers do. They ate. Social media filled up with videos of people camping in booths for hours, plowing through round after round. The math collapsed almost immediately, and the company reported an operating loss of around $11 million tied to the promotion. $11 million. Remember that number? Because the media coverage treated it like the murder weapon. Late-night hosts joked about it. Business articles called it one of the great pricing blunders. And look, it was a blunder. Making a loss leader permanent is a self-inflicted wound, and some analysts have asked the obvious question: who benefits when a restaurant sells unlimited shrimp at a loss? Arguably the shrimp supplier that owns it. But here's the forensic reality. An $11 million promotion loss does not bankrupt a $2 billion restaurant chain. $190 million a year in rent, compounding 2% annually for 10 years on real estate you used to own, does. By the time the shrimp promotion made headlines, Red Lobster had been bleeding for a decade. The endless shrimp wasn't the disease, it was the fever that finally made everyone look at the patient. In January 2024, Thai Union announced it was walking away, writing off hundreds of millions of dollars in losses on its investment. 4 months later, in May 2024, Red Lobster filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. 93 restaurants closed almost overnight, their contents auctioned off, tanks and all, and the company asked the court to tear up more than 100 additional leases. And when the company's court filings listed the reasons, right near the top wasn't shrimp, it was the leases. The burdensome, above-market leases created by the 2014 real estate deal, the company said it was drowning in them, and a huge share of the closures were simply restaurants whose rent no longer made sense. 10 years. That's how long it took to go from a $2.1 billion acquisition to bankruptcy court. And at every step, someone got paid. Golden Gate recouped its money through the real estate. The property company collected a decade of rent. Thai Union sold its own product into its own restaurant. The only parties left holding the damage were the employees, the customers, and the brand itself. Now, this story does have an epilogue, and it's more hopeful than you'd expect. In late 2024, Red Lobster emerged from bankruptcy under new ownership. Fortress Investment Group, which took over the company's debt and brought in a new chief executive, Damola Adamolekun, the former CEO of P.F. Chang's and one of the youngest chief executives of a major restaurant chain in America. The turnaround team shed the worst leases in bankruptcy, which, in a dark irony, was the only legal way to escape them, and started rebuilding the menu and the restaurants around what customers actually wanted. Whether Red Lobster fully recovers is still an open question, but notice what it took to give the company a fighting chance. Bankruptcy. The chain had to legally collapse to shake off the obligations that the 2014 deal bolted onto it. That should tell you everything about how heavy those obligations were. So let's close the file on this one with the actual cause of death, because it matters beyond Red Lobster. The chain didn't die because Americans ate too much shrimp. It died the way a lot of familiar American brands have died, a private equity acquisition that stripped the company's most valuable asset, converted it into rent, and left the operating business to slowly suffocate under costs it never used to have. Toys R Us, Sears, Payless, different industries, same autopsy report. The details change, the paper trail doesn't, and that's the entire point of this channel. The story you get in the headlines, the shrimp, the viral videos, the jokes, is almost never the story in the filings. The real story is in who owned what, who sold what to whom, and who was collecting checks while the ship went down. The headlines blamed a promotion, the paper trail points somewhere else entirely. If you want more files like this one, the companies you grew up with, and the deals that quietly hollowed them out, That's what we do here at the Liquidation Files. The next file is already open. I'll see you in that one.